All right, and welcome to the Synchronicity Show. It's your host, Kevin Wathey, and in today's episode, I sit down with my Australian man over here, Lachlan Stuart. Lachie is the founder of the Man That Can Project, an internationally renowned men's performance coach for high achievers, as well as a podcast host. The Man That Can Project is a company leading through action, inspiring through vulnerability, and empowering through authenticity, who are empowering men to take ownership for their lives and be their authentic selves through their global Strong Men of Value online community. After putting all eggs in one basket and failing to be a professional athlete, Lachie felt lost and uncertain for his future. Drug abuse and high alcohol consumption left him at rock bottom, and a stroke of luck left him with an opportunity to take ownership of his life, and he soon discovered the importance of building a strong mind and body to live a fulfilled life. He has turned his life around with 4 simple pillars: muscle, momentum, meaning, and mateship, which you lucked out with the 4 M's there, you Australian mate. And he now uses these for men from all walks of life to empower them to master the 8 areas of life. His goal is to practice what he preaches, which has enabled him to live his dream life. Lachie, my man, welcome to the show. How is your morning over there?
Kev, thanks so much. Can I call you Kev? We abbreviate everyone's names.
100%.
You're Kev or Kevo now for the show. Mate, my morning has been phenomenal. As I said, I was just in the gym with a mate and he brought his son along, and it was literally like one of those YouTube stacks on the treadmills, which everyone watches. And I just saw this 8-year-old kid on the belt just go falling forward in slow motion and then hit the deck and just went spitting off the back of it. And I was like, oh, I don't know whether to laugh or like race. I raced over there, obviously, but then once he was fine. I was like, right, should I laugh now? And internally, I've been laughing for about the last hour, so it's been good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I am stoked to have you here, and I'm excited to kind of see where this conversation takes us after having pretty much what was part 1 on your show, the Man That Can Project. The first question I have for you is something that came up in your bio here too, and that is to empower men to master the 8 areas of life. What are these 8 areas of life?
In no order, it is physical health. We got our mental, emotional health, our financial, lifestyle, relationships, the friends, family, and what else have I forgotten? Mental, emotional, growth, and spirituality are the areas. So for me, I think, a lot of people have 5 areas. Some people have 12. For me, what worked well and what really resonated with me when I have been delving into my own mind and I guess areas that I live my life in, it broke down to those 8 areas because they're things that I've sort of gone, not down the rabbit hole, but I've definitely spent a lot of time trying to learn about how I can improve those areas in my life. Because I would say most of them have been problem areas at some point. And, when we've got problems, it's time to look at them. And I think a lot of blokes that I, hang out with and get to work with can really resonate with that. So I feel like that's the golden number.
Is there a specific 1 or 2 of the 8 that stand out to you in terms of what you've had to deal with or work with specifically in your life?
Yep. For me, it was the mental and emotional was a huge struggle, and just relationships. As much as I had a lot of friends, like I was surrounded by a lot of people, I still felt really lonely, like lonely and disconnected because I wasn't being my authentic self. I was trying to be someone else, to try and fit in because I was bullied growing up. And in order to not be bullied, I just was like, okay, I got to make myself the tough rugby guy. And in doing that, I'm sure I'm not going to get bullied. Funny enough, I still got bullied by the better footy players, but that was the main one. But just the mental and emotional was probably the biggest one that for me held me back, and it caused a lot of challenge in my life. And I see it time and time again with many other blokes. We just don't understand what's going on in our heads, and we don't think the way that we feel is normal, when in reality we're all going through the same stuff, just in similar, different situations.
Yeah, and I'm curious to dive into, which I want to bring up a bit too today, is the sports aspect, because I know we have similar backgrounds, and you rugby, me ice hockey, and the same kind of approach is you approach a sport, trying to become a professional in it, that is seen as this like masculine activity, and then all of these other emotions that make us complete human beings are essentially pushed aside because we're told to act and respond a certain way. So, I mean, before we get into that, I want to backtrack a little bit and go back to when you were a wee pup, a little kid, and a wee pup. And what was it? Was it always rugby, or what did you want to be when you grew up?
I always think about that question. I think for me, I just wanted to be accepted. Like from a sports standpoint, the first sport that I really experienced success in was athletics. So I was an Australian like top level 800 meter runner. And then as I got older, I got faster and lazier. So I went down to 400s and then was trying to get into the 2s and the 1s. But even in my last year of school, I was the state, so Queensland champion in the 400 meters. And because I'd already decided football was my path, I didn't go to compete at the nationals. But the year prior, you know, I'd placed second and all of that sort of stuff. So running was, I think, what I enjoyed most because it helped me get out of my head. I'd always sing one song. I had one song, and I might share it later, that I'd always sing when I was running. But it was just a place where I never got picked on because I excelled. It was like my mum and my thing. Like whenever I'd get to travel she was like my manager. So that was like our thing. And as soon as I stopped running, even though I'm back into it now, which we can probably touch on later, our bond sort of fell apart. And then when I got into the rugby, that was purely off the back of being bullied. But, you know, prior to that, it was always in summer, it was running, and then I'd be skateboarding and every other activity throughout the rest of the year. But, you know, being a skateboarder as well, I was skinny and dweeby, so I got bullied for that as well. So I got away from the things that I really enjoyed and built myself into a rugby player.
Was it what were the aspects of running and rugby and skateboarding? Was it the competition that you were drawn to, or was it positioning yourself in a way that this is something you excelled at and you thought if you were good at it, you wouldn't then get picked on because of it?
I think it was an accumulation of both. It came easy to me. Like, I think I loved not the pain, but I loved challenging myself when people would be in a workout at running or didn't want to show up to training at 5 a.m. I loved the fact that I was prepared to do that. And I was also lucky enough that mum was prepared to, you know, drive me to training to be able to do that. And then it was always the next challenge. You know, I was skinny, little, like I'm not a naturally built person, but I was just like, okay, I can work harder. I can practice kicking. I can practice passing. I can sit at the skate park for 10 hours a day, just learning tricks when other people won't. And that's what I think I loved about it was if someone was better than me, I was like, I'm definitely going to learn it. So definitely competitive, but I just genuinely love learning. Like it's just seeing what I can get out of my body, even to this day, even though, you know, I'm not in any competitive field. Every time I go to the gym, every time I go to the track, every time I go on the skateboarder and go for a surf, it's like, okay, I've got to improve. What was I learning last time that I want to nail today?
What do you think because I'm curious to dive deeper here because I'm very similar in that approach where it's like, if we're going to compete for something, I'm going to die or beat you.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to be the kid that flies off the treadmill or I'm going to win. So where do you think that drive, determination, and competitive edge stems from? Is that something that was conditioned in you from an early age, or is it something more kind of intrinsic?
To be honest, it was probably always for Dad's attention. I think, you know, Dad was always working and he loved rugby, like loved the contact sports. And when I started playing rugby, that was when our relationship like was rock solid because we had something to talk about. And you know, every time I made a rep team or did this, that, and the other, it was like, that's when the emotion came out for both of us. But I think there's always been an intrinsic motivator to prove to myself that I'm worthy. And I love not necessarily recognition, because when I get it, I feel weird, but I love feeling significant. I love the fact that people can count on me to know that whatever I do, I'm going, like, if I'm committed to doing it, I'll absolutely tear it apart. Like that's what I I pride myself on. Like if I like even getting back into running training now, it's like, I'm not going to do it half-assed. I've got a coach. I'm making sacrifices. I'm doing this, that, and the other to give myself the best shot to achieve what I want to achieve. And that's how I do everything. There's otherwise for me, it's like, could be doing anything else. So don't waste my own time.
Well, I mean, it's like the cliche statement of like how you do anything is how you do everything is so true though, because it's how we show up in those little moments, those things that we don't think that matter are the ones that are what condition us to then show up that way in the future for the bigger thing. So if you can't do the small little things and like hold yourself accountable or have that kind of unbreakable bond with your own word, then why do you expect yourself to show up in a big way when like all the cards are on the table if you couldn't even do it when it's the little chips from the side, you know?
I think that's the perfect thing. It's like if you break your own word, then what else do you have? Because you would see there's people walking around every single day. Like, you know, there's lots of people that I speak to that are still talking about playing footy 10 years ago. And I'm like, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore. The world's moved on, time's moved on. And what have you done now? You're still living in the past. So I think I've still got that hunger to, you know, hold myself accountable. And I want to get the best out of myself. And I want to know that when I'm, you know, on my deathbed, whatever age that is, hopefully it's later rather than sooner, sooner rather than later, that I can look back and go, everything that I did, I, you know, gave the best of my ability. I wasn't one of those people who said I was going to do something and then, you know, was doing this, that, and the other on the side and was giving it 70%. I don't want to look back at my own life like that. And I it's frustrating to see people who believe their own bullshit when they're doing that in their own life. And they're like, oh, I'm not getting the results that I want. I'm like, of course you're not, because you're drinking and eating terribly 7 nights a week. And then you're coming into the gym to try and change your life, or you're investing in a business coach, or, you know, even some people who start podcasts. Like I had a guy reach out the other day and he's like, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, I'm just getting started with this. It's like, you got to work out how to make things better. You can't just start and think that it's not going to impact your life, because, you know, if we're spending 2 hours on a podcast and you've lost 2 hours from somewhere else in your life, you got to be prepared and be okay with that. And that's what I think. I love the game of how can I get all this to work to still bring out the best in all of, it's like a big Rubik's Cube.
I call it mental Tetris.
I love that even more.
Mental Tetris is how I kind of relate to a lot of things in my life, because I try and find it's sometimes a pro, sometimes a con, because I'm always optimizing something. But the way I think about it is everything that you're doing either propels you forward or pulls you back. There's no stagnant. There's no like even keel. You're either growing or you're not. And in a lot of ways, having that kind of all in, all out mentality is a really good thing. But then in other ways, it's also kind of a negative in a sense. I don't really want to label it a negative, but it deters from a lot of other things because you're so invested in one approach that you then can't pivot when you need to, because you're like, this is my mind, this is where I'm decided to go, and I have to go there. And it almost, in some areas of my life, I think it's held me back. I would say probably in like an emotional way as well as a relationship way, because I'm so involved in work or in exercise or in something that I neglect other areas, because I'm like, this is the commitment I made to myself. It's the number one priority. Nothing else matters. And then you need to be like, oh, cool, but there's other elements of life I need to deal with too, you know? So it's
hard.
I'd be curious to get your kind of feedback or input on that, like being so type A in a sense, where you're all into what it is that you're investing in. How do you then maneuver or ride the wave of being able to go right and left, so to speak?
Yeah, I look at it much like a rigid and a flexible approach. And there's certain things in my life that have to be rigid, like my standards and expectations for me, right? I always think that where my life is now, the one thing that stands out to me is I have certain set of standards and expectations around self-care and self-management that allow me to be more efficient, feel better when I'm around other people and the rest of the world. And they're things that I'm really rigid on, like my exercise, the way I communicate, my personal development, taking time for myself. But then there's things that can be like flexible with that, right? When I look at that, it might be like the timing, what specifically I'm doing within that. So let's use exercise as an example. Non-negotiable daily, I'll be exercising. It's a staple. And ideally, in a perfect world, I'd be doing that for 90 minutes to 2 hours. I just love it. Like the whole process of stretching, warming up, cooling down, stress in my body. But life happens, and sometimes, I might have commitments elsewhere, work's busy, whatever's happening. So I need to be flexible to go, okay, well, the non-negotiable is still there, exercise is there, but how much time I can afford to invest in it today is changing. Bless you. So I'm looking at having that sort of rigid approach around staples, but then also being flexible with how I put it out. Just like, some mornings I might wake up and, there's a difference between the excuse of I'm actually tired or I'm just lazy and I don't want to get out of bed because it's cold. And I feel I'm pretty in tune with my body and, what I can get out of it based on the stress that I put myself through physically, mentally, and emotionally. And some mornings, which is very rare, but I might go, all right, I'm going to give myself that extra 30 minutes. But what's going to happen is that's going to cut into my morning routine. So I've now lost 30 minutes from my morning routine. So what am I prepared to decrease? Is I'm not reading for an hour this morning, I'm reading for 30 minutes. And so while they're still rigid and that same process is there, I'm flexible with timing and information input, if that makes sense. Same with relationships. Sometimes it might require you spend a whole weekend not working and not with mates and just with your partner. Other times, you've got a workshop happening. I would imagine there's a week where it's going to be less time together purely because your focus is on the workshop.
Mm-hmm. I like that you address it through kind of a ripple effect. So mentality where you're like, okay, I know that I need this, but how is that then going to affect the rest of my day or the rest of my routine or the rest of my workout, exercise, whatever it ends up being? Because it really is that. And that's where I get into trouble sometimes with my own self and my own routine is okay, it needs to be this. But then if one piece is off, I'm like, well, shit, now I have to figure something out because it's not in the same order or the same kind of, and I say that, and then I also hate routine at the same time because I like new things. You're like, I need to mix it up. But in the same token, you're like, okay, you recognize how much better I feel when I have that repetition. That's like, right now for me, it's wake up, go for a run. I'll do some sort of like, if I'm not going to yoga or the gym first thing, I'll do some sort of like push up, pull up, sit up, squat, just to like get my blood flowing. Read, coffee, dive into work. And it served me really well for the past couple months. But now it's getting to this place where it's almost in a sense too easy. It's like so habitual that it's like boom, 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 done. And it doesn't now challenge me to the level that I need. And it's an interesting thing. And I've had this kind of like thought process myself. And the more my business and the consulting side of things grow and the more stressors I take on externally, the more stressors I then need to impose upon myself in terms of physical exercise and movement. So it's like the harder work gets, the harder I need to pick up my shit and like go to the gym and work out harder and run farther and longer. Because you need like, and I feel like most people are the opposite. It's like work's getting harder, so let's back down on the exercise side. But in actuality, it's you got to raise them to meet the same level. And if you want to perform at the highest level or in like an A player level, you need to make sure that both of these are in check. And if one's rising, you need to raise the other one up to meet it.
It's crazy that I literally put a video out the other day, touching on something similar where that is the first thing that people sacrifice. It's like, oh, I don't have enough time, work's too stressful, I need sleep, whatever, and they just sacrifice physical health or the physical activity, which promotes good physical health and also good mental health. And I can understand it, but I also still can't get my head around the fact that people do that, because if you're not feeling good, if your energy is not on point, if your mental sharpness isn't there, everything becomes harder. It becomes a drag rather than being able to, I even look at reading, for example. I average about 50 pages an hour. So I'm not an exceptional reader, but because
that's pretty good.
I've had a Bucks party, and then we had a weekend away. So there's probably been 3 weekends where I've had a bit of alcohol, and I don't normally drink. And I'm down to about 20 to 30 pages because I notice I'm getting distracted. I'll be looking over here. And so my focus, I'm making myself slower purely because my diet's been off, but my physical activity hasn't been there. So I know that's why I was at the gym before this, is to get myself back to the standards that I want to be in, feeling strong and confident and assertive. I have to raise the bar again. It's not going to happen if I just keep going, I'll just ease back into it. No, it doesn't work like that. You got to get in there, and it's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's what challenges us to be better. And it's often the guy I was just training with, one of the top real estate agents in Australia and this whole place. And he is insane, his work ethic, but he's in there every single day, 5 a.m., rain, hail, sunshine, whether he's been out networking the night before, it's a non-negotiable. And for me, I'm so inspired by that because I see people who have lifestyles that I want, and I'm like, they're not making excuses. They're not neglecting their health. They're not neglecting their family. They just somehow make 24 hours in a day really work for them. It's insane.
It's interesting you say that too. And it's something that I've recognized. And the reason I've been having this kind of conversation with myself and that I've recognized is that as I got busier with coaching clients and with consulting, I let my kind of yoga practice and physical practice drop off a little bit. When I let that drop off, so did my closing rate for sales. I then boosted back up my yoga and fitness regimen, essentially. And now this is higher than it used to be because I went all in onto physical fitness, which nothing changed. Nothing changed in terms of what I was doing. The only thing that changed is where I was approaching the conversation from energetically. So I was leveling up myself, which then is being perceived by someone else in a heightened way, which is then increasing a sales or closing ratio there, which most people won't think. They'll be like, okay, well, what's wrong with me? Well, have you done your morning routine? Do you have these things dialed in? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating right? All of that fuels the Ferrari that is your body. And if you're not fueling it, then how do you expect to perform not only for yourself, but for someone else? Especially being in the role of a coach like yourself. If you're not doing that, how do you expect someone else to? It's like your words aren't matching your actions, so why should I listen to you in the first place? Exactly.
But even for anyone out there, we're all a role model for someone else. If you're a parent, or you're planning on being a parent, or if you're a mate, a son, or a daughter, any of that, right? Your energy matters, right? How you look after yourself, how you feel about yourself has that ripple effect that you were talking about. It's like the synchronicity of everything that we do impacts our output. And so many of us are just dragging our knuckles through life, wondering why we don't feel happy, wonder why we don't feel like we have meaning in our life. And we are looking for all these quick fixes through pills, potions, and everything else in between. But right in front of us, it's a beautiful day here in Brisbane. I can't wait to get out. I'm doing a Wim Hof thing today, but can't wait to get out in the sun. Practicing yoga, practicing breath work, learning to get in tune with your body. Because if you do that, you're going to get the answers that you're looking for around what kind of nourishing food you need to eat, how you want to move your body for you. We've got all these answers, and it frustrates me, but I understand it, so I don't let it annoy me too much that so many people are just like zombies through life, when we can all literally have the abundance of energy and passion and fulfillment in life that we want. It just starts with these simple things that we're sort of talking about. So the intent behind it.
The first step to change anything is awareness. And I'd be curious to let's backtrack in terms of your the chronology of your life, so to speak, because you weren't always in the position you are today and with the mindset you have now. So where along the line was the shift or the transition to taking radical ownership of your life and of where you wanted to take your life, and as well as show up for others in a specific way?
It was around 2013. I think in the lead up to that, I'd had a million moments where I should have been made aware of it, but I was just like, no, I'm going to blame everyone else and everything for why my life's not going well. But it was 2013. I had got myself into a situation where, obviously it was a violent situation. And I still remember when I got arrested and dragged down these set of stairs, I was thinking to myself, just sitting at the bottom of this nightclub and looking around and everyone's looking at me, I'm like, I am literally a piece of shit. And how did I get here? Because, a year before I was playing rugby in France, I'd come out of school. I'd gone to a really prestigious private school over here, and I had nothing that should have put me in that position. But if I backtrack, because I was bullied and I wasn't allowed to be who I wanted to be, I was, putting on this mask. And a part of that mask was, I'm going to be tough and scary because I don't want to be bullied. And if people see that, so then I started hanging out with the wrong kinds of people to sort of support that, because even at school, I was still getting bullied, even though I was in the first 15 and everything like that. And I was a great athlete, I was still getting bullied. So I was like, right, if I start hanging out with thugs, then I know they're going to be there for me because they love to have a scrap and all of that sort of stuff. And it just got to that point where I was like, all right, well, the easiest way to deal with things is fighting or aggression. And I just remember that moment at the bottom of the stairs, just thinking to myself, like, this is not how my life is supposed to be, like, at all. Never did I think I would be this guy. And I think a lot of people can relate to that sense deep in your gut where you're like, I'm here for something bigger. I'm just not sure what it is. I'm not sure how the hell I'm going to get there. And after that, I always say it's 2 weeks. It was probably like 2 months, but I ended up down in Brisbane. So I was in a Toowoomba, which is about 2 hours inland of Australia here. And within, that 2 month period, I was out one night and I said to myself, I'm never drinking again. I'm never taking drugs again, because all of those were involved in that. And I was at a pub, and that's where I met my now fiance. And obviously I was intoxicated then, so I didn't keep my word. But it was that moment that I was like, okay, I really have to change, because I don't want to mess this up. And lo and behold, I had a mate who introduced me to network marketing, which at the time, the sales pitch was like, this is going to change your life. And I was just like this young guy who hadn't experienced personal development, wasn't around positive people, didn't have anything going for me. So I saw all this opportunity to earn money, this, that, and the other. And I was like, I'm in. Don't know what I'm doing, but I'm in. And from the moment that happened, he gave me a book, The 4 Agreements. And I was like, he said, mate, leaders are readers. And if you want to be successful, you got to read. So I was like, okay, yes, sir. Because I straight away, I was like, anything that you say, I'll do. And then probably 2 months after that, we were in our major semi-final for rugby. And this was my last year I ever played rugby. And he's like, mate, you got to come to this event with me. It's $25. You got to come to this event. It'll change your life. And I remember thinking, well, one, if we win this game of footy on the weekend, we're in the grand final, which is awesome. I hadn't played in the grand final for a couple of years. But a part of me was like, I really trust him. And I said, whatever he told me to do, I would do. But then there was also the additional thing thrown in. It was $25. I had no money. Plus that $25 was probably going to go towards beer on the weekend. But luckily for me, that was it. I ended up doing it. So, and I also got back in the team the next week anyway for footy, because we made the grand final and won it. But yeah, it was that moment when I finished that book, The 4 Agreements, which is staring on my bookshelf right now. I got excited by two things. One, I'd read a book that wasn't a skateboarding magazine or something like that. But two, the lessons that came out from that like inspired me. I was like, whoa, I'm actually starting to think differently. And for that little glimpse, for the first time in my life, I had a little bit of confidence outside of sport. And I had this and I also had something to work towards. I'd been given, obviously the vehicle for me then was sales, etc. And I was like, awesome. I'm going to be the best at this. I'm going to do whatever it takes to be the best at this. And that was just like that. I'm not looking back from that moment.
Was that when your rugby career then came to an end as well?
Yep, 100%. Yeah. What was that, 2014? So yeah, that was done. But back then, like I was just playing back locally in my town by then. So I'd finished up in France the year before.
How was it different? How was it different playing in France to playing in Australia?
It's wild, like just culturally. So in Australia, when we finish footy, you normally crack a beer and whatever. If you eat, you'll eat like a steak or something. I remember my first game, we were driving back from Paris and the boys are prepping a cheese board, pulling out the champagne. And I was just like, what the fuck is going on here? What? I just couldn't comprehend what was happening. And then I was like, whoa, this is culture. This is different. And then after that, I embraced it. But from I didn't speak French. So it was really fun trying to tell people where to go and what to do when in the heat of battle, I was thinking in English. So even like passe le coup, like trying to pass the ball and all of these sorts of words that I'd learnt to direct and run the show was not happening. So it was interesting. It was fun, but I definitely didn't maximize it because I was, young and didn't realize the opportunity that was in front of me. So I was just that same guy that left Australia. And I left Australia because of a relationship breakdown. Like I wasn't ever planning on going to play rugby in France. It was more so a relationship breakdown happened and I was hurting and all I knew to do was run away. So I sent my rugby CV out to as many clubs in Europe as I could and snagged a gig. And then I was like, I'm out of here. And so I went over to France, isolated myself, was still that lonely, self-conscious, heartbroken dude, just in a different country. So I took my problems with me, which also highlighted to me that you have to do the work. You can try and distract yourself and run away as much as possible, but it's always going to be there.
I'm curious to dive a little bit deeper, almost like double click in a sense, on playing rugby in France and not necessarily playing rugby, but more of the culture and the experience you had traveling from Australia to France and recognizing the two different things, the two different cultures. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think when I think of like Australian culture, it's a little bit more brash, kind of manly, like bloke, so to speak. And then when I think of French culture, I think more of like effeminate slightly and kind of more like love language, in touch with their emotions. Having that difference and then leaving Australia, what would then be after the breakup, you trying to repress your emotions, but then going to a different culture that's very much in tune with their emotions. How did that then affect you, especially then playing rugby in that culture as well?
It was definitely eye-opening. Like even the way that the blokes like kiss each other on the cheeks and they genuinely care. Like we talk about mateship, right? And mateship, the term of endearment is when you call your mate, an explicit word. That's a mate. But to people that aren't your mates, we're polite to over here. Whereas in France, I'll tell you a story about one of my closest mates from France came over here and he was blown away with how we treated each other. He was just like, what's going on? But they genuinely care and they genuinely listen. Like when you go to the pub or if you have dinner, like everyone's connecting and interacting. Like it's a huge thing, dinner or any meal, and just spending time. Like when we got to the football club, everyone would literally go around, shake hands, kiss the cheek to every single player. And when you got a squad of 30 people, that takes a long time. That takes like 15 minutes. You got to get to training early to do that. And I'm just sitting there like, in Australia, I didn't even shake anyone's hand at training. We just all stand there in our little groups and get into training. Like, so the connectedness that they have and the community that they have is second to none. And it is like, that's what one of the biggest things of us as mateship / like community, because I see how empowering it is. And like just taking a little moment in time with every person before training, that makes you want to play sport with them, because they become more than just a person standing next to you. And when I got to then start seeing the conversations that they're having, obviously I couldn't understand all of them when they were in French, but like you know about your families, you know about everything that's going on in your life. All we speak about here is football, women, and or like how hammered you got on the weekend. That's it. I couldn't have told you the first thing about what's going on in my mates' lives. Still, some of these mates that I've got now, the conversations don't happen because they're not open to having them. It's crazy. But then, learning the ins and outs of how, I once again couldn't speak French. So getting internet set up at the apartment and all these things, like Etienne, who's one of my closest mates still, bent over backwards in a way that I would never, I couldn't have imagined myself doing for someone moving to Australia at that time, but he did everything for me and made sure everything was accommodated, everything was looked after. Like they genuinely just care, and they mean it through the way that they conduct themselves, which is amazing.
When you spoke on that, it made me think of a quote that I saw and read the other day, and it was by, I want to say, Eleanor Roosevelt, and it was, "Small minds discuss people, good minds discuss events, and great minds discuss ideas." And that stuck with me a lot, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the who said this, she said that, he did this, and you can almost feel if you actually break it down and you look at it, how your body feels when you're in that state, speaking positively or negatively, but about a person, it just feels small. Like you're not expanding in any way. When you move into events or then experiences, and I would say travel is something that you can pay for that always makes you richer, case in point, going to France. But then going from that to an even heightened level, so to speak, would then be talking about the ideas, which we can keep on France, or segue into ideas, because the idea that I want to bring up is your kind of reason behind starting the Man That Can project, because that's very much something founded upon an idea, not necessarily a person or an event. So you tell me where you want to kind of take the conversation or what route you want to pivot here. If you want to continue down with France, we can, or if you want to pivot to the Man That Can, it's completely up to you.
Yeah, let's pivot to we use both. We'll segue between both, but I think the idea that popped up to me, I still remember that, I think it was the German guy who jumped from space with Red Bull. Mm-hmm. I can't remember his name, but that was one of the loneliest days I remember, because no one we had the day off training and I was just sitting in my apartment watching it. And I still remember how anxious I was and how much I still wanted to reach out to my ex-partner, and all the bubbling up of things happened. And it wasn't long after that before I started realizing I'm kind of got issues here. And the idea that I wanted more from my life that wasn't sport. I always thought that sport, being successful, would give me everything that I ever wanted: money, success, recognition, all of that stuff. And now I had it, and there was no box ticks, or the fulfillment never happened. And, moving forward to the idea of how that sort of ties in to the Man That Can project, I've never seen a group of people so happy as the guys at the club, but even Etienne and his mates outside of it, because of the way that they treated and cared for each other. And I never had that. I have great mates, but that's not how we do things. As you mentioned, we're blokey. We belittle each other, we make jokes on each other, and we think that's nice. But meanwhile, it's eating us up inside. So when I went on to found the Man That Can project, I was in Austria in 2016, 17. And I still remember walking to the pub to get a pint and a chicken schnitzel, and someone messaged me on Instagram. I can't remember exactly what they asked, but by this point, because I was posting a lot on social media, he was asking for some form of advice. And I remember thinking in the street, what was the one thing that I needed when I was at my lowest that would have really added value to me and helped me not have to go through the stuff that I went through? And it was just super simple. I was like, I would have just loved to have access to blokes from all walks of life successful in various different areas, from being a great parent, being a great mate, being a great business owner, whatever, just mentally fit, physically fit. And I'd love to just be able to sit with them and talk, and like honestly talk, not just scroll through the highlights. I want to know what sucked for them. What were their negative thoughts? Because we always see the logic, which is like they started here and went to here, but what the fuck happened here? That's what's missing, because my head's killing me. And a lot of blokes' heads are, unfortunately killing them. And ladies, so I always say, for everyone listening, I always say blokes because I work with blokes. And that put the idea that if I can get that happening, let's test out what happens. And I put an Instagram video up straight away being like, as soon as I get back to Brisbane, we're doing a men's circle. And I just thought circle because that was the first thing that popped to my head. And that was an idea. And when I thought about that, I had no real understanding of what it could be or how it was going to run. I wrote out like a 3-page thing. I was going to tell my story and get everyone to listen. I was like, nah, no one needs to hear my story. No one cares about my story. Let's just learn from everyone else. And that started at 7 blokes. And then within the next month, we're at 20 something. Then we went to 30 and we're just running them monthly. And that just kept building layer upon layer. I was always like, okay, well, what did I need next? Or how can I help these guys who are showing up? What more value can we add to help them actually start making change in their life? And I was always, and everything that I built the Man That Can project on has always been, what did I need? And it sounds selfish, but I think a lot of the people that resonate with my message can relate to the story of sport and alcohol and drugs and things like that. So then I'm like, okay, this is what I was thinking at this time in my life. This is why I didn't take this risk. This is why I was still doing this. And I like to share that and get people thinking about that and getting them to actually improve that, like we spoke about before, their self-awareness, so that they can start joining the dots for themselves. I hope that was the right tangent. As I was talking halfway through, I was like, I hope I've
No, 100%. And I appreciate the authenticity that you share with it too. And it's an important point to recognize that, I mean, anyone listening who wants to start something or has that idea that you had, you obviously now recognize that so many other men are going through the same thing, and they were able to empathize with you because it's something that you've dealt with yourself. And I'm going to relate this back to business for a second, because I work with basically business coaches, and I coach business. But it's the people and the people I work with that are the most successful are the ones who, quote, make their mess their message. Because they're then able to take what they've dealt with, spin it into something that they're essentially offering what they needed to themselves 5 years ago, but to other people who are going through the exact same thing. And when you do that, you're able to take a step back and have this kind of like bird's eye view of, this is where you're at. I know exactly what that feels like because I've been through that shit too. I can empathize with you now. And by doing so, you actually recognize that I'm here to help you, which then kind of breaks through that layer of shit, because without that, they're like, okay, cool. Thanks, Lachie. Fuck off. Yeah. Fuck off, because I don't really believe you. But in the same sense, like, oh, wait, no, he's gone through all of this. It 100% makes sense. I can now see that. And now they get better results because of that. Because now you're kind of this, like, whatever you want to call it, heart-focused, impact-driven kind of approach to helping people through the same thing that you then needed help with yourself.
100%. That's exactly, and you probably see it and experience it a lot as a business coach, but there's people who aren't aligned with what they're doing. You know, we look at, I think gone are the days where you just do things for money. Like back in our parents' generation, cool, like that's the thing. But I think now with so many of us having so much opportunity to learn from incredible people like yourself, or read books and listen to podcasts all around the world, it helps us understand ourselves on a greater level, on a deeper level. And the ability that these phones and technology give us to create, whether it's an informational product or a coaching service or whatever it is, really puts us in a position to go, well, am I excited about this? And would I find value in this? And that's what I always come back to. And that's why for me, as the business continues to evolve, I'm trying to make things more efficient. And I'm trying to also make sure that I personally am getting fulfillment from it, because there's things that I have done in the business that, like the men's circles face to face, I loved them for 3 years. And I got to a point where they just weren't as fulfilling as they were originally. And rather than keep showing up and grinding it out and starting to get resentful, I was like, look, they're on the back burner now, because at this point in my life, we've got other things and it's evolved, and I'm prepared to focus on that. That's where I want to put my energy, because if I'm feeling fulfilled, I'm going to show up better for everyone else that's, showing up for me.
That's so true. Before I continue on that, the guy jumping from space was Austrian, Felix Baumgartner. I just Googled it for us.
Yes.
He jumped, he's best known for jumping to Earth from a helium balloon from the stratosphere and landing in New Mexico. I've
in your claim to fame, man.
To jump from space.
It's wild.
To continue on that kind of impact-driven mentality, though, and fulfillment-driven mentality, and I relate meditation to business a lot, because a lot of people think of business as how to make money. They think of it as an income-generating activity, when that's actually the result. Now, when you think of meditation, a lot of people think meditation is quieting the mind. That is actually the result. So when you take a step back, what is the action of business? It's providing value in exchange for money, or providing impact in exchange for money. So then what is meditation? Meditation is maintaining a single point of focus for a prolonged period of time to then quiet the mind. When you now flip that to a business perspective, I'm going to provide value for a prolonged period of time, which then in turn drives income. The more value I can offer, the more income I'm going to make. The more value I can have and the bigger problem that I can solve. Business is all about solving problems. A lot of people show up and they think like they're trying to start an online business, or they try and get into a small business, or do stuff for themselves, and they get into it and they think they spend money on a coach that is just going to be like fall into their lap, like, oh, I'm done now kind of thing. But in actuality, you have to show up and then do the work. And I always say this, like, if you then raise your hand, like, business is all about solving problems. So problems are going to arise no matter what you're doing. But if you're the kind of person that's going to raise their hand and say, hey, I need help, you're going to be successful in whatever it is that you do, because you're just overcoming the next problem. It's like going back to working out, or to sports, or to running, or to rugby. There is an obstacle in your way in everything that you do. The more comfortable you get at approaching obstacles, the better you're going to get at whatever it is that you're doing in life.
Could not agree more. It's we just need to look at every mentor, book, podcast, bit of information as like a GPS. Right? It can help us navigate to where we want to get to, but we're the only one who can put our foot on the accelerator. No one is going to do it for us. It's when you said people hire a business coach, it's like when people come into our programs and they go, oh, I've done it. I've just invested my whatever. It's life's done. It's like playing the fucking pokies. Yeah, they call them pokies over there. Yeah, it's like
pokies.
No.
No. What are pokies?
Is it the slot machines?
Do we call them slots? I've never heard them called pokies.
We call them pokies.
The hell are you talking about, man?
And there you go. Just bridged another gap
between connecting the dots over here.
Yeah. But we need to understand that the investment is the easy part. The investment in time, the investment in finances is the easy part. Then being able to implement and act upon what we're learning is fucking hard. Like that's when you're dealing with your fears, all of that stuff that comes into play. And that's why for me, it's like having a coach or a mentor, even someone that's just achieved what you want. This can be paid or unpaid. It doesn't matter. To walk side by side you, who has done what you want to do, because the investment is us going, okay, I just want to be confident. I just want this amount of money per year. logically, that's what we're looking for. But it's this stuff in between, the emotional roller coaster that comes with that we need people to go, mate, it's completely normal to feel that way. This is how I felt when I did that as well. For you to go, oh, sweet, coming out the other side eventually. And GPSs don't give that as such. Well, they do. But you know what I mean? Going back, I was trying to tie that into that and metaphor I used, but didn't work very well. So
I like I'm going to pause you real quick because I like the analogy you're using there with that. I kind of just lost where I was going to. Oh, there we go. I like the analogy you're using with it. I know I was like, the thought has left the building, but we got it. I would say take that one step deeper then and ask yourself why. Like if the goal is to make X amount of money a year, why? What is that going to do for you? It's not the money. It's never the money. Cool. You make 120 grand a year. That's the goal. Why? You want to make $1 million a year. Goal. Why? What is that? And then I'd even argue too that if you're then focused on making the money, you're still searching after an external factor rather than actually turning it internal and saying, why the hell do I want any of this? Because what is it going to do for me? And if we backtrack here and take my life or your life as an example, it's like, I want to be a famous rugby player or I want to be a professional hockey player. Like, what's the actual reason? Like for me, it was in the same essence as you, it was acceptance and wanting to be seen as the best at something so that I wasn't like, in a sense, picked on or felt lack or not enough in different areas of my life. And when you then dive deeper and you kind of peel back the layers of the onion, so to speak, and you ask yourself why, you then uncover all of this other shit that is actually the driving force that has nothing to do with the money, that has nothing to do with the job, the position, the sport, the really anything else. And when you break it down, we all want the same things. Like we all think everyone's outside of ourselves, but everyone is actually one and the same. We're all part of the same kind of ecosystem, so to speak. And we all want love and connection and to be understood and heard. That's literally all of it. We just cover it up with a bunch of different dirt that we call our problems and trauma and past and all this other shit that doesn't actually matter. You just hold on to it because you want to have an identity. And when you let that go, then you're able to step forward and move into who you actually are. Like, I know that's kind of a tangent there, but it's so recognizing it from the outside now and like taking a look at my life in the past. And in no way am I perfect, or is this is where I'm just currently at thinking and mentally. But it's now when I recognize that, then I'm like, wow, like why did I do all of these things previously in my life? But then you can't regret any of it because all of that sets you up to be exactly where you are today.
Exactly. It's like you would never undo anything that's ever happened in your life because it's given you the perspective, the experience, the ability to empathize with everyone. And, you know, that's living in this planet as well, because it's much as, you know, we spoke about before, self-awareness, and then like moving on from self-awareness, I believe it's the most important thing. The more self-aware you are, the better quality of life you're going to have, the deeper relationships, the more money you can make, all of that. But then it goes to self-management. How do I learn to manage myself now that I'm aware? Right, what do I need to take responsibility for? What do I need to learn? What do I need to sacrifice in order to achieve that? And it's like the process of understanding your mind and your psyche. It goes from self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, so understanding what's happening in the world around you, why people think, act, and behave the way they do, so that we aren't always at the effect of that. Because a lot of people go, this person pissed me off. It's like, no, they didn't. No one has the ability to do anything to you. You're choosing to be pissed off because you're not understanding. My favorite quote of all time is that seek to understand before being understood. Or it's also one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I love that because then it goes, okay, if you want to have social influence, which is the fourth point, after social awareness, is social influence, whether it's in front of your group of mates or whether it's on a global scale, you always have to work back. So to have influence, you have to have social awareness. And this is probably people who are into politics. I'm not, but I know in the States you got both, like it's crazy over there. We get all your news over here with how hectic it is. but like having a bit more social awareness to then coming back to self-management, how you conduct yourself while out in the world, living your life, then comes back to the self-awareness as to why maybe you respond this way, why you think this way, why that, that trauma you're holding on to. And so if you start to break it down into that four-step rung, you can look to improve it and create better results.
It's moving from, I don't know the exact 4 steps, but from an unconscious place to a conscious place, essentially.
Yeah.
You're moving from what is habitual in a sense or conditioned to a place where you're actively responding rather than reacting.
Summarized it beautifully.
I was trying to find a way to pull it in there. I liked how you said it, and I was like, how can I make this succinct and write it down and take notes on this one?
That's what I always find when I'm talking. Whenever I'm doing a video or any bit of content or just learning, I always take notes, and then my brain processes things, it's always this long-wind thing. And so often when I'm on a podcast or when I'm talking to people, they summarize it in these beautiful sentences. And I'm like, thank you. I'll be using that in the future.
Can I get the recording of this so I can play that back a couple times?
It's a way to do it.
Well,
my mind. But that's just a little segue just quickly. One of the things that held me back for such a long time was the fear of not knowing what to say or the fear of not knowing how to articulate myself. And that used to make me very angry to the point where I'd be aggressive because I'd have feelings like most of us do. I wouldn't know how to express it. I wouldn't know how to put it into words. So I just wouldn't say anything. It was like a mute. And then I realized that, in order to, like we just sort of said then, to get people like Kev to make my words sound better is you actually just got to start speaking, because people can give you feedback, or you could, once it comes out of your mouth, you're like, I could use these words differently, or I could structure this differently. Same with writing, right? It's the same. And that's how we can get some brilliant feedback in terms of that, rather than just not learning to express ourselves more. That was just a little.
No, I love it, because what it makes me think of is everyone says practice makes perfect. Or no, it's fake it till you make it. But I like to reframe that and instead say fake it till you make it, practice until you become it. Because then you have control over that. So rather than saying fake it until you make it, because then there's an element of fear or lack from that. If you say I'm going to practice until I become it, you then have control. And like we talked about previously in the episode about how you were like, I'm going to outwork everyone. Now you have control over the outcome because you're going to practice until you become what it is that you want to do or be.
Just written that one down too. That's perfect. The negative connotation, but yeah, I think for me, it highlights just how plain and simple it really can be. In order to improve anything in your life, whatever area sucks, whatever area is making you unhappy or holding you back, if you've got the self-awareness to go, okay, that's a thing. If we can accept and acknowledge it, we can then go, okay, well, what would have to happen, or what is that next step for me that is going to allow me to improve that? Right? I was terrible with money. I never had money. And then when I got money, I wasn't very good at managing it, or I wasn't good with taxes. So there's always what's the next step for me, layer upon layer. And it might be with your nutrition. It might be relationships is a big one, like intimate relationships. How do we keep those developing and growing? It's always what's next for me? What can I do to make this better? And rather than going fake it till you make it, fake. Like imagine continually faking having a good, or Instagram, faking having a good life and making it look like you're living the dream, but behind the screen you're miserable and broke. So why don't you just practice putting the work in to be more financially intelligent, to be more mentally and emotionally aware, to be able to do what we're doing. Like I know you read a lot. I know you put a lot of time into yourself. Rather than just faking it and copying quotes and doing stuff like that, it's like you read and link it up to your own experiences and maybe clients that you also work with. That's what makes you such a valuable person to myself and to other people, is because you're practicing what you preach, and you're also acknowledge the fact that you're not perfect. You're still just on, what's that next step for me? What's that next step for me? And for a lot of people, you're well ahead of where they are, and we're just trying to not keep up, but learn what you know.
Yeah, I mean, first off, I appreciate the recognition in that front, but it's not really a competition in that sense. It's always just like you trying to become the best that you can be every single day for yourself, not for necessarily anyone else. And the succinct way to say it kind of thing was McConaughey's speech from the Oscars. And he said that there's three people I look to. I look up to God, to the side to my family, and forward to who I want to be in 10 years. I'll never achieve who I want to be in 10 years, but I'm always working towards getting one step better every single day.
I love McConaughey.
I know. Did we talk on your podcast about his book, Green Lights? Was that? I think that was right when I had read it, I was chatting with you for that.
I just finished it as well. Have you done the audiobook or the?
No, I should re-listen to it with the audiobook just to hear his voice.
Hey, it is phenomenal. It's just like on the Calm app where you can listen to his bedtime story. Have you listened? Man, falling asleep with Matthew McConaughey whispering in your ear is a beautiful thing.
That's making sure you're in touch with all of your emotions there too, eh? Well, Lachie, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time and hopping on today. And I kind of want to take the last final segue here to pick up kind of where we were talking about just a second ago. And that's always striving to be working to the next best thing, always striving to be the best that you can be. What does that then look like for you in your life, whether personally, professionally, or elsewhere? Where's the trajectory of Lachie's life looking like?
For me, it's just being the happiest, healthiest version of myself. And I know that's cliche, but I want to have health that when I'm 90 or 100 years old, I can still move my body. I can still be active because it's such an important part of my life. I want to have the financial means to have flexibility to enjoy the world that we've got, and to be able to, just even take time to do podcasts or connect with people because I want to. It's not an effort to change, but I also want to be a great role model and father and husband. I think they're all exciting things. And for me at the moment, what fulfills that is the Man That Can project, and is my business, and all the people that I have in my life are incredible. But I'm also not attached to, you spoke about before, identity. It's like the Man That Can project, for example, doesn't define who I am. If I find more fulfillment and if I get more growth out of being a dad I'll spend more time there because I'm just going to do what feels right. I have learned to back myself more. And I think, moving forward from that growth, it's just whatever I feel is the right thing for me at this point in time, I'm going to do, and I'm going to do to the best of my ability.
It's taking it back to that awareness that you have of where you want to go, and listening to yourself and being kind of in tune and in touch with what that then looks like for you in that moment. Because what's right for you right now won't necessarily be right for you tomorrow, but you have to be able to recognize it so that you can then take the next best step forward, or the correct foot forward, so to speak.
Yep, exactly.
Well, to wrap up here, I got a couple rapid fire questions for you. You ready?
Let's do it.
Here we go. Drum roll. I should add on the Roadcaster, a drum roll thing at the end. So
I know. I got that file where it's like, wah, wah, wah. In case I get it wrong.
All right. So first one up, in terms of your own personal development, who or what has had the biggest impact on you?
Probably my fiance, just seeing how she is bold enough to do what she wants and go after it, and create the level of success that she's mind you, being in a male-dominated industry, and one that Australia sort of sits behind the eight ball in terms of success with. So that's been inspiring to just make me want to work harder.
What industry is that?
Music.
So
she had a big hit over in the States as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you know the song Geronimo?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So that one. It's a little Aussies making it over in the States.
Number 2, if you could have a conversation with someone alive or not, who would it be and why?
At the moment, I would have to say Elon Musk. Like, I'm reading his book at the moment, and it's so left field, but I've just found his story so fascinating, and the level that he works with, and the fact that he can openly admit that while he wants and has a certain expectation, he's also open to admitting that how he treats people and stuff he needs to work on, when realistically you might see people with the level of success and authority that he has who don't care about that. So I think what he's achieved, I'd just love to, plus that Joe Rogan podcast with Dave Chappelle, where they're talking about like how interesting it is to sit down and chat with Elon. Actually, probably Joe Rogan as well would be fascinating because he just knows so much about so many random things.
Literally everything.
Blows my mind. I think that's for me, because I've been so focused on self-help for the last 8 years, there's so many other areas in my life that I've stopped reading and learning about. So I think we spoke about this on my show. That's an area that I'm exploring more, like reading more autobiographies, but getting back into things, skateboarding and everything else, and just really sinking into that. So I, have more than just self-help to talk about, because I found myself being that. I don't think Joe Rogan would have a beer with me doing that.
The trifecta would be you, Joe Rogan, and Musk all on the same podcast.
Can you imagine that?
That would be fire. I would pay a ticket. I would pay to get a ticket to go watch that.
Man, I'll give you a VIP.
There we go. Now we're speaking our language. Here we go. All right, number 3. If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
You are enough. Simple.
Last but not least, in your opinion, what is the single most important thing someone can do to live a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life?
Surround themselves with good people that allow them to be their authentic self. I think if you do that, everything comes from a good place without a mask.
I love it. Without a mask, literally and figuratively, in the state of the world right now.
Yeah, true. COVID.
Well, my man, I sincerely appreciate your time. I want to open the floor to you. Is there anything else you want to say or add? Thank you for coming on. I honestly, this was one of my favorite conversations I've had to date, and thank you again.
I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I'm going to listen back to this multiple times purely to learn how to re-articulate myself. But I think I just appreciate the way that you go about doing things, the authenticity and just the conversation. It's been one of the best conversations I've had as well. So I appreciate you having me on. I feel privileged to be on here. So thank you.
Thank you, my man. Well, maybe this will be the bookend to chapter 1, and we'll have to have you back for a part 2 and see how long we can stretch this out for, Keep it going until the conversation gets stale, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
All right, Lachie. Well, I will sign off then, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Good luck with Wim Hof today.
Thank you. Enjoy your retreat.
Hey, it's Kevin here, and before I let you go, I wanted to let you know that the complete show notes for this episode, as well as any other, can be found at kevinwathey.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a short review on Apple Podcasts. I love reading the reviews, and they're often the tipping point in helping us book some very hard-to-reach guests. Now, if you want to or would like to receive a weekly email from me called the Weekly Mindful Memo, head over to kevinwathey.com/VIP to subscribe. By signing up, you'll receive exclusive behind-the-scenes access and be the first to know about upcoming episodes, retreats, and more direct to your inbox. Again, you can sign up to receive the Weekly Mindful Memo by going to kevinwathey.com/VIP. Thank you for listening. Much love, and have a wonderful rest of your day.